How's that?
Sorry.
That was great.
Iron fist.
I love it.
That was your dad coming out in you.
That's right. This is a somewhat more informal than our normal meetings, luckily, thank goodness. So start with a roll call.
Yes, sir. And let me get to my list here. Mike Fan,
Here.
Jonathan Rocha,
Here.
Randy Goodman,
Here.
Nicole Kennedy,
Here.
David Rowe is excused, Anthony Teeters,
Here.
and Arnold Urias is also excused.
All right, let's just jump right in. Item A, presentation and discussion regarding the Workforce Housing Committee's mission and vision statements and goals.
Yes, sir. So we have a bubble chart up on the screen just as a way to define the terms as to what a vision should be, a mission should be, goals, values, et cetera. At the May 31st work session, when this committee first got together, there was a proposed language for a mission and a mission statement. And let me get there on the slide here real quick. So this was something that staff put together just as a broad brush statement, and this is up for discussion today. And I'd like to say at this point that there's a lot of information that's been swirling around, and we will be covering a lot of information here as well. So if we need to draft something and come back to it later, we can do that. But this information is being provided just to get the cogs meshing. And right before the meeting started, Randy Goodman also has a proposed mission statement that we can look at together too. So I'd like to just open it up for discussion as to whether the committee thinks this kind of captures it, or if there's some wordsmithing you'd like to see done for the mission statement. And we'll look at the vision and goals next, but right now this is just kind of a broad brush mission statement for the committee.
Randy, you want to?
Well, I like mine, but, you know.
Well, I'll go ahead and read yours, and please be sure to speak into the microphone just so we capture it online. So Randy proposed the mission statement: plan and preserve workforce housing now and for the future with all Prescott's population in mind.
Impressive, isn't it?
Very impressive.
And I'll circulate this around so that everybody can kind of read and digest it. And real quick, from our previous slide, I'm just going to, as you guys think about it, tell you a couple of points as to what a mission is. So a mission should capture what you do now, for whom, how you do it, and what this achieves. So in the smallest, most condensed way possible.
Well, when I thought about that,
If you could talk into the mic, Randy. Thank
when
you.
I thought about that, you know, obviously you think about creating workforce, but we've had dialogued about the neighbors and the neighborhood, and they're just as important in that mission statement as the workforce people that are going to benefit from the housing. So when I wrote that, I was kind of thinking about the neighbors in the neighborhood, that they need to understand that there's a benefit as well, and that they're part of our mission statement. They're not excluded from our mission statement. So this isn't strictly just for workforce, it's everybody. So that's all. I don't care if we use this or not really, but I hope that we think that way when we create it.
Okay. Other members? Thoughts? Ideas? Comments?
Of course.
Here you go.
Do I need to speak into that?
Yes.
Yep.
I think one of the additional messages in that message is understanding that they benefit from this also.
Right.
And I think we need to, because if you look at these dots, there's a lot of comments that are almost as though they weren't involved in this in some way. But we have to make sure that they understand that they benefit in big ways from making sure that we have enough workforce housing. Restaurants, health, school, fire, police.
Yeah, you and I have agreed on that before. I get
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
totally get it.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can make a mission statement 2 pages long if you want, but
No, I like the,
when I was on the fire department, we did a lot of this for different committees and different things we did, and we tried to keep them concise and short so people could look at them and kind of understand. I mean, that was my thought here. But I think the most important statement in it is that we consider all of our population, not just the people that need workforce. That's all. So however you want to word it, go for it.
just a suggestion, what about adding at the very end of what you said, comma, for the benefit of the community?
Yeah, I had the word all in there at one time. I know I do have all. I took one word out. Now I can't remember what it was. I had another word in there when I originally wrote it to try to encompass all. And I ended up taking it out, trying to make it short. But once again, guys, I don't care. I mean, I care, but
What about something like plan and preserve workforce housing now and for the future?
Microphone, sorry.
here. We just get headsets.
We'll share this.
So you're beginning, Randy, plan and preserve workforce housing now and for the future to promote a healthy, vibrant community for all, something like that. I do like that, speaking to everybody. I think it's really important as we're building consensus as well.
I was hoping we didn't have to use these things today. Yeah, because ultimately, it's going to be us. If there's any sales pitches that goes on to the community, it'll probably be us, right? So think about what you want this to stay, because that'll probably be part of your opening when you're making a presentation to a senior committee or senior center, I mean. So what's the first thing you're going to want to say? And your mission statement usually is that. And then everything you say beyond that sort of accentuates what's in the mission statement. So if you're a presenter, what would you want to start with? Right?
I like Nicole's tweak to your writing there, Randy.
Here, write that on there, would you?
Thank you. So I guess just to throw in my comments here, I like the idea of being more broad because right now there's not much definition as to what exactly it is. So that's, I guess, one of my comments there. I would say rather than just creating housing opportunities, maybe we can consider adding the planning, the preservation, and the creation of housing opportunities and solutions, maybe. And then for our regional workforce, should we define workforce? I just don't. Sometimes it seems like because we're always at a standstill on trying to define what that is specifically for this committee. Workforce, attainable, affordable. Our targets are on, public servants, health, service industry. We've kind of circulated those thoughts around the committee. So maybe, and I'm not saying we have to, I'm just saying that should we maybe put some definition in there as to what specifically we're talking about. And I think that's about it. I do like the regional part a little bit. I know we've talked about like Prescott or some of the verbiage there might be to Prescott. It just seems like it's very hard to detach the regional aspect of things when we hear from CAFMA and all these other folks who have a regional presence more so than just Prescott. But that's just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the resolution that formed this committee does specifically mention workforce. And I mean, it does have a broad connotation. I mean, workforce means anybody that is working, and that is the target because that population is the one struggling the most with finding housing. So I feel like workforce as a term is a good one to include in the mission statement. I mean, after all, it is the Workforce Housing Committee. And I do think, though, that it captures more than just, workforce in the medical industry or in this or that industry. It does cover more than just those folks. But you were going to say something, Mike?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to. You took the wind right out of my sails for part of that anyway. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. In the same token, it is important, like you said, when we go speak to somebody, okay, what is the mission of this, is the mission of the committee, so it is important. addressing your comment as being regional, I absolutely believe we should be reaching out and gathering partners. But my comment would be, this is a Prescott commission. So Prescott comes first and foremost. Not to say we won't be addressing regional concerns, but Prescott is number one. That's right.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. That was what popped in my head when John was talking too. I thought about, well, this is, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, look where you're sitting right now.
So we can, what I would propose, if there isn't a whole lot of further conversation on this, is, to your point, Mike, not spending a whole lot of time trying to pick it apart and putting words in. We can take what Randy provided, what Nicole clarified, and we can send them via email for further comment. But I'd like to go to the next slide, which we had provided before as well, the vision. And this kind of opens it up to Randy's point as far as the last statement, life for our residents. So the vision for the Workforce Housing Committee is to provide housing options to attract quality employees and reduce employee turnover and burnout, and lead to increased levels of service and improved quality of life for our residents and workforce. So again, this is just a draft that Amber and I put together based on prior presentations and information. But again, some of the verbiage and points can also be pulled out and used to expand the mission statement. But again, the vision is supposed to capture where you're going and what you want your mission to ultimately achieve for you, your customers, and/or society.
I like exactly what you've written, with the exception of "and burnout." So
Okay.
I would scratch that, in my opinion. But everything else looks great. Everybody else?
That's true, because that's not up to us. No, I like it.
Well, I think it's important in your mission statement to make it attainable. Sometimes mission statements are so flowery that you're never going to hit the target. You're never going to hit the goal. So when I was thinking about what I wrote, I want to plan it and try to preserve it so it lives on. If you guys agree those are attainable, that's the other part of that.
Yep.
I mean, you can write anything you want, but if you
Right.
never get there, what's the point? Go ahead.
Anybody else on vision?
Just a small suggestion to
Yeah.
shorten the words a little bit. Perhaps attract and retain quality employees. And then we could take out that whole part about turnover and burnout. Perhaps.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would support that too, because a lot of the employee turnover and burnout is not necessarily within the hands of this committee, right? So it doesn't specify that it's specifically for the housing element of it. So maybe Nicole's dead on that. If we just simplify the verbiage there, it would get rid of that whole middle section of reduce employee turnover and burnout,
Perfect.
right? So I think you said to attract and retain.
And retain.
Yeah, that's great. I support that.
All right. Well,
Anyone else? Okay, there we go.
okay. So we'll send out the draft mission statements with Randy's verbiage and the other verbiage, and send this one out as well. And then maybe at the next regular meeting, we can just finalize them and adopt them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Look at how much we got done in our first study session. I mean, we're 15 minutes in. This is great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, I apologize, Chair. Are you ready to move on, sir?
Well, is this still the next one is regarding public outreach and education. I think we're still on
Yes.
item A of goals. And I think this is really the meat of this study session, because to frame it up a little bit, we have spent months now gathering information and kind of a shotgun blast of discussions. My feeling, it's time to focus our efforts. What can we reasonably accomplish, and how do we accomplish that? And our discussions have been, is it on the worker side of things, as far as helping with down payment. We've talked about down payment assistance and assistance on the rent, any kind of a grant or help from the employee side of things. And then we've also talked about help from the developer or housing side of things, and how we can accomplish on providing more reasonably priced housing, whether it's purchase or rentals. So those are the two major areas we've talked about, and then and a whole myriad of other discussions. So I think it's time we start focusing our efforts.
Wonderful.
You're looking at me, so I got something to say. I agree.
Well, you usually have something to say.
I know, I can't shut up. I agree, because my old city, you and I are going to talk about this someday, but my old city, we addressed this very issue, and retention of employees is a huge deal. That comes down to salary, working conditions, and all that kind of stuff. But if there's a down payment assistance program that we can offer some of our key employees or all of our employees, then we retain them, because usually there's a time frame associated to the payback of the assistance. In other words, for example, if we were to give them $50,000 assistance and they matched, and they work for us for 5 years, they've worked off the $50,000. Okay, they don't owe us anything after 5 years, because I think statistically you'll find that once an employee is here 5 years, they're not leaving. So then we get them for 30 years, right? If they leave prior to the 5 years, say they work 3 years and they take another job somewhere else, they owe us 20 grand. That's 10,000 a year is what they're working off. So purchase assistance program is huge. The issue becomes, where do you get the money? So we started a program, and I'm not going to explain it to you now because it's really involved and it'll take up the rest of the hour. But we were able to provide a service for our citizens that they benefited from, that they were willing to help contribute to that very thing. So it wasn't something for another. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to raise your taxes, or we want you to put money in this fund. We want you to put money in this fund, but this is what you're going to get for that money. So when you say what you just said, I think it's a double-pronged approach, Mike. We have to think about this side, what I'm talking about right now, what we can do to retain the employees. And then we have to look at the developer side and what can we do to retain the developers to want to come build this stuff in our city. And I think that's what I've always thought our end goal should be.
Okay.
Great. So I think down payment assistance and financial assistance for City of Prescott and our City of Prescott organization and employees, as well as our partners, is something that could be definitely a goal on our list. And what we're talking about today, we don't have to get into necessarily the weeds on each of the goals, but really, what do we want to accomplish in the short term, and what do we want to accomplish in the long term? And I agree, a down payment assistance program for the city as an organization is a wonderful idea. I think we should pursue that. I don't know if the committee wants to see that on the short-term goal list or on the long-term goal list, but that is definitely something we can add. Amber and I put together, based on prior conversations, a list of short-term goals, a list of long-term goals. It's in your handouts of you gave them handouts of the slides. So we provided you with page 9 of the slide presentation is just what we have up on the screen here for you. But I think, to Randy's point, that would probably be a good short-term goal, putting together a down payment assistance program. And thankfully, when Northern Arizona, or Housing Solutions in Northern Arizona, was here, they provided us a copy of their CHAP program, which is their Community Housing Assistance Program, which allows for up to $15,000 in down payment assistance. We can craft something very similar to that. And that, I don't know if we could get to that in the short term or if that's a long term, but that would be something to put on the list.
Well, it took us a year to get ours going, and so I don't know if you want to consider that long-term or short-term, but you have to, it's nice to say that you're going to do that, but where's the funds going to come from? Mm-hmm. And that was really the biggest issue. So we had to start another program to fund that. Mm-hmm. And that took a year to get that up and running. Okay. And it's been operating I retired in 2004, and it was operating in the black a year after it started, and it's still operating in the black today.
That's
So it's
great.
doing really well, about 13 million a year annually.
Okay,
It generates for the
Great.
employees.
great. Okay,
So it was a fund? Was it a fund?
It was a service that we provided, which I don't want to go into now, but I'd be glad to in a more relaxed setting. But we provided a service to our citizens that they paid for, and we ran it outside the general fund for a long time, and unfortunately now it's part of the general fund. But we ran it outside the general fund, which allowed us to take monies that it made, because it was a profit business, basically, and we shifted those profits into our employees.
But when you say we, was it the fire department?
Fire department did it.
Okay,
We did it.
Independently? So how did they structure it?
Well,
Was it separate?
well, I think we're getting a little
Yeah.
bit into the weeds. Let's take a step back and talk about what SMART goals are. So Randy mentioned, achievable. That is absolutely part of what a goal should be. And we go by the SMART acronym. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And is it time bound? So just keeping those in mind, let's just take a look at the list. And again, this is a draft based on prior conversations that the committee has had. And as we think about these list of goals, I'd like to hear from the committee what short-term and long-term means to each of you. What you feel we can achieve in the short term, and what you feel might be the long term. In my estimation, just to throw it out for discussion, a short-term goal would be something you could achieve within a year. A long-term goal might be in the 3 to 5 year range. So short-term, maybe 1 to 3 year, long-term, 3 to 5. I don't think we should push it beyond 5 years. But you have the list up there. I'd like to kind of pass it back to you, Chair, to start a discussion.
Well, we spent a fair amount of time reaching out and gathering information, and one thing we learned from Northern Arizona Housing Authority, is that?
I think it's Housing Solutions of
Solutions.
Northern Arizona.
Okay, thank you. Is there are partners that we can reach out to and ask their assistance. Clearly, down payment assistance is something that's out there. We just need to gather more information on how to implement that within this community. Mortgage assistance, we've got folks here that understand that end, and we need to investigate what's out there to keep payments down and try to get something more affordable when it comes to their monthly payment. And maybe it's a combination of both of those things. Rental assistance is something we've talked about. That's probably short-term also. Again, how is a big question, but it's certainly something that I think we can work on. And then on the developer side, that's been a large discussion, but to sit down and put together a stakeholder group that can address it from that side, that is something it's going to be private. It's going to be driven mostly on the private side. So we need to have, I believe, a stakeholders group together that can really sit down and say, okay, who can bring money to the table, and how can we work together, pursuing grants and pursuing private dollars and public dollars to put the pieces together to make that happen. And then how do we retain that in perpetuity?
What about coming up with a list of options? Because there's going to be several, don't you think? Because I think it always helps, because not every single person is going to fit into that requirement. So if we offer a combination of different things.
Sorry, we have to use the microphone.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
apologize.
What about making a list of options and keeping, like we've just talked about, several options here, keeping a list so that if we do end up ultimately with a brochure, or we're going to be going to places talking or speaking about this, that we discuss several different options, because not everybody is going to be able to fit into one. There's another program I was reading about, again in Texas, and it was a rent-to-own program, and it was offered by a developer. And they had tiered based on the applicant's income, and whether there one income or was there two, and then the price of the rent was laid out according to what their combined income, in some cases single income, was, and a percentage of that was to be withheld to go towards the down payment for eventual ownership. So there are a couple of programs, I think, if we could get some definition. In fact, at one time, Chelsea, you were going to invite in a tax attorney, a tax accountant that was pretty well versed in what the government offers in terms today for people that are, in this predicament, the workforce, getting them into home ownership. Did we ever talk about that any
No.
further?
No.
Okay.
But
Because they're-
that's something that we can do. I think that would probably be something we could put on an upcoming regular agenda, because with the SMART goals, we need to identify goals that are achievable, and that's more of a ongoing kind of investigation of what programs or options are out there for us. I think a short-term goal around the financial aspect would be create a down payment assistance program for the city organization.
Well, what I'm saying, in addition to that, if we go private or we go to a government-funded program that are available now, I think it would be good for this community or this commission to understand what is available to us now, because it is a thing. It's not just Arizona. It's all around the world, and there are different tax benefits that are coming up in order to help alleviate this problem. And I think we should be pretty well versed on that and have somebody, an accountant, come in, or whoever's been keeping up on that. And I think it would probably be a specialty. But I think with a little research, we could try to figure that out and bring them in and explain, as a developer, what they have that's available to them, as a single purchaser, what's available to them, because there are things coming out all the time on that issue.
Right.
Thanks.
Yes.
Well, let's just stick on short term for a minute if we could, just to get a little more focused, narrow focused. Short term, I see the ADU unit changing the code. That's something we definitely can get done, right, George? That's something we should focus on. The other thing is we've heard a lot of presentations from people with the need. I think that's all we've heard. I really want to hear from the private developer. I really want to know what he needs from us and what he's willing to do. Because then we can say, okay, well, we can do that or we can never do that. Right now, it's sort of, I don't do workforce. I don't know what they need. You know what I mean? I really don't. Maybe you do, Mike. I don't. So I really want to know that. And then once we know what they want, we know what the need is. The hospitals talk to us, the teachers, the fire department, everybody, right? But we don't know what the developer's willing to do. And that's what I want to hear. And I think that,
Willing or can do.
yeah, willing or can do. And I think that's a short-term goal that's totally achievable.
Great.
And then we can work on the long-term solution to whatever they tell us.
Can
And
I
think
ask
we need to hear from more than one.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
In your experience as a developer, do you feel like the committee should work on some sort of request for proposal before just asking the developers that we know if they can speak to this? And I say that because we want to tell them what the goal is, and we want them to tell us how to achieve it. So it feels like, and we want more than, the people that we know to be able to speak to it in case there's someone out there that has expertise that we just don't happen to know. So it may be a good idea to put together some sort of quick, executive summary on what we're looking for and what we need guidance in, and then invite whomever to participate in that discussion. So I agree that would be a good short-term. I think that could be a short-term goal, is to figure out how we get the best people in front of the committee and get the information, pump them for information, essentially. But does that make sense as a developer?
Well, Mike, you got to weigh in here. He develops a certain product. That's his area of expertise in his field. I develop a certain product. I do not do workforce. So I don't understand what their package looks like. So a workforce developer is going to have a package, right, Mike? And this is how he bids, and this is, so if he can hit this mark, and this mark, he knows he's got something he can do. I don't know what those are. So I really need to hear from those guys to tell us, right? Is this making sense to everybody, or am I babbling?
Well, you're babbling, yes, but
Thank you.
here would be my concern, and Connie just said, can we invite them in? If we did that, I would suggest it would be in an e-session, because some of those discussions would probably be proprietary.
Maybe, yeah.
So it's not something that initially, anyway, would be for public consumption, I don't think, and we could be shooting ourselves in the foot doing that. As far as a request for proposals or something like that, I think you're going to get away from the philanthropic nature of this community. I think there's a strong possibility we will find landowners that might help us out. And whether that landowner is truly a developer or teams up with someone that does workforce housing, to Randy's point, there's companies out there that's their specialty. So I would not want to miss someone's philanthropic nature by going out there and not at least testing the waters there.
Okay. Well, I think there are ways, and I'll get with legal after this meeting to figure out the exact way to have that conversation. But perhaps on the short-term goals list, it could be something to the effect of inviting local and maybe non-local developers, builders, landowners to have a stakeholder meeting about this particular topic, and what vehicle is best to reach out and get them involved and notify them that this is taking place.
Right.
Okay.
I think, excuse me, I think also when we reach out to them, we need to give them kind of a loose list of what we're trying to do. Because if we just say we want you to come in and talk about what you can do for workforce housing, you got to say specifically we're looking for what you can do as a builder as far as cost of building or whatever they're involved in. How do they, so they don't come in not knowing what we're going to ask them either. They want to come in prepared, because they'll go to their legal, they'll go to their business, their executives to say, can we afford to do this before they come? So when they come here, they will have an idea of what they can do.
Yeah, that's what I was driving at with the request for proposal, is
Yeah.
being able to tell them and communicate what we're looking for so that they have a basis of what to speak to when they get here. And that makes a lot of sense. And that is, I think, something we could come up with in the short term.
Well, what are we looking for? Are we looking for a 2-bathroom, 3-bedroom house? No. We know what our employees make, right? We know kind of what they can afford. The retirement systems tell you 30% of your income, no more, should go to your housing. So that's kind of a nice rule of thumb. So when you say, what do we tell the developers what we're looking for? It's an economic structure that we're looking for, not a product. They'll tell us what they can provide for that economic structure, but we should be able to tell them, hey, look, our employees are going to be able to pay, I don't know, pick a number, whatever it is a month to own or rent, and here it is. That's an average. Can you do something?
Right, and I think the research we've done to date has pretty much focused in on $1,100 or $1,200 a month in that range is where it needs to be. It's a tough target to hit,
That's a very tough target.
but we need to figure out how to do it.
Well, and as to the products, the survey that went out just several weeks ago is going to inform that even more. You know, it went out to employees in the region, our stakeholders, leaders in the organization. So we'll be able to know, hey, this is basically what people are looking for, the product type, whether it's condo, apartment, SFR, whatever. And the size and the number of bedrooms. So I think we can get that information together to be able to package and send the information out to the developer community. So I think that is a very realistic short-term goal. So developer builder meeting.
Chelsea, one thing though, when you put that out there, I don't know that I would use RFP because I think that means something different to the developers. Maybe be just more of a request for information than an RFP because that means you're ready, we're ready
Sure.
to get something. And I don't think,
I'll work with legal on the best vehicle to
Okay.
do that.
I mean, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So,
Chelsea,
you guys.
sorry, and then
Yeah, go ahead.
just for reviewing some of the conversations we've had here too. I mean, we've talked about. I mean, if we want to try to have some sort of predetermined productive conversation with some parameters, is like, what's your thoughts on allocation of units on new projects? What's your thought on? I think the conversation pretty quickly always goes to deferment of impact fees, building fees, permit, all that. Infrastructure would be huge. I mean, a builder developer coming and saying, look, if we need to hit $1,100-$1,200, I need to shave or carve out this much cost out of per unit per door. How is that doable in a partnership with the city and infrastructure, with extension of mains or sewers or whatever the case, water, whatever. We've talked about the allocation of units. We've talked about who will manage. If a builder developer would want to do that and allocate some portion of the project to workforce housing, who would be in charge of managing that? I think we talked about most builder developers would not want to, it'd be like, okay, great. I believe in the cost to reserve, have workforce housing for the city. I just don't want to touch that. I don't do it. I don't know how to manage it. What are the parameters? What's, that kind of stuff. So that's just food for thought, maybe getting even specific to recapping or reviewing some of those conversations we've had and throwing them into the, giving some framework around that conversation would be super helpful. And then I guess, well, if we're not moving on to another short term, I'll wait until we're all done here talking.
Okay. Anything else on the short-term goal of the developer builder meeting? And the idea after this point, when we come up with the list of goals, is the next work study session will be specifically targeting the short-term goals, looking at fleshing those out. So we'll have chance to talk more about this subject and get those in line. Nicole?
Yeah, I'm just curious about, Yavapai County had rolled out the Home of My Own program.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was talked about last time since I missed, but is that something that we want to look at as far as just being able to plug and play and get some quicker results on one area?
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. And Sandy with the YCCA has discussed this with our chief building official and myself. So we're already looking at it to see what we can do to implement a similar program here. So absolutely, that is something we could add to this committee's short-term goal list to see feasibility and what that would look like for the city. All right, we've got two on there so far.
I think if the committee is done talking, I think we have a comment from the peanut gallery.
Yeah, thank you for the comments.
You're going to have to use the microphone. You got it? Okay, cool.
John Jones, who some of you probably have seen here, and we met with the chair. He's not able to come to the meeting today. He's out of town. He asked me to present one thing as far as the goal. How many units is the goal per year? How many units is the goal for the first year, and then second or third year, or up to 5 years, if you're talking about 5 years? One of the things that was on the screen was measurable. If you want to measure your results, that's the way to do it. And it's also a way to go to city council and say, we have a 1,000 unit demand just in 4 major employers. Do we want to solve this in 100 years, or do we want to solve this in 5 years or 10 years? I think, and I'm agreeing with John, that is a very good goal to present to the city how many units you're really looking for. And the other comment I just want to make quickly regarding what Connie had mentioned about having a tax person come in and talk about what the opportunities are. I think there's more opportunities than tax opportunities. I think the committee should ask for somebody to come in here. What are the opportunities for grants? What are the opportunities for tax write-offs? What are the opportunities for proposals on the state level? And that wouldn't be a tax person. That would be maybe the Flagstaff group or another group. They understand because they've been in that field. So that's my two suggestions.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that a 40-year career in building has done, there are hard costs that are what they are, and you're not going to be able to change them. When you're building, you know, whatever it is, from a 600 square foot unit up to whatever, the building costs are what they are. So what happens a lot of times, the part that becomes affordable for the reimbursement back to the developer or the builder that does these things are how are they going to have that subsidized? And it comes exactly what you said. It comes through grants. We just did it on a smaller scale with the teacherages. It comes from grants. It comes from tax breaks to the builder. Maybe you'll get a break on materials by buying in bulk. I mean, it's a combination of a lot of things that makes it affordable and brings the cost of it down. But it's not all on the back of the developer unless they want to be, like Mike says, a philanthropist and write it off. And if that's the case, it goes to their tax attorney and they figure out what they can legally write off by donation. And, you know, some things you can get up to 80% of it written off. But it's a combination of understanding how to maneuver through the grant process, the tax process, what's available. And when you have a company that specializes in workforce housing and they go into the Situation Room, it is like a forensic audit. Every penny is dialed in, where the grant is, how much is the grant, can we get a tax break on this, how much do we save on the material when we buy in bulk. And then you take all of those things and you add them up and you apply it back to the sheer cost that you can't control. So that's how it becomes more affordable. So I do think that if anybody's going to step into this world, it would be beneficial for us to talk to people that have actually done it. And because again, the other part about that is that the grants and the taxes are a moving target. They're here today and then they're gone tomorrow. And so, you know, it's a lot about timing as well.
Yeah, and Howard, that's a good segue into long-term goals. I was going to suggest that we indeed facilitate a stakeholder group. My opinion, that would include Dignity, Yavapai College, PUSD, the City of Prescott, Yavapai County, probably CAFMA, the Chamber of Commerce. Keep it small enough that it is somewhat nimble at least, but really find out. We can sit here and talk individually to each of these organizations, but as a combined unit of people that really need workforce housing, I think we need a stakeholders group that says this is what we're looking at and this is what we're looking for. John and I and Chelsea and Amber met with a representative from Yavapai College, and they have recent experience on what has worked and what they've thought was going to work, and frankly, they got no takers. So I think we learned a lot last week from Yavapai College, and I think it's important to have the stakeholders tell us what will help them and how can we put that together. I mean, housing authorities, land trusts, 501c3, there are various avenues we can go down. We really need to hear from the stakeholder and say, yeah, if you did that would work for us. That would address our needs.
Putting together the stakeholder group, you feel that would be a long-term goal?
I do. I think that is something that working together, it might be a land trust or a 501c3 that says, okay, here's how we're going to help that happen in perpetuity.
Right.
We heard how UC Irvine they're into their 30th year, I believe we heard. And it's a land trust, and it is working extremely well for them. And it is set up to work in perpetuity. It's been going for 30 years, and it's still addressing the needs of their staff. So it's pretty cool.
Okay. Formalize stakeholder organization for meetings.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Good long term. So far I've got 4 short-term goals. Do we want to finish that list, or did anybody have any other goals they wanted to throw out there for consideration?
I had asked this in the past, and I'm going to ask it again. I think we should have somebody come up here and speak to the benefits but the negatives of forming a housing authority
Okay.
from the legal standpoint. Because there are, with the housing authority, there are some strings attached to that, and I'd like to have everybody understand that.
And I think that would fit well under Mike's, the formalizing stakeholder organization. We're looking at the best option. And, that might be an option, but maybe it's not the best one, to your point. Okay, great.
I also think in the short term, we need to have a project that starts. Something that needs to be functioning before 3 years. We can plan and plan and plan. If 3 years from now we still haven't gotten anything out of the ground or something to offer, whether it be mortgage assistance, whatever it is, I think the public wants to see something happen, not this continuing, here we're going to do this, that. Something in the short term needs to come to fruition that helps the people we're supposed to be helping. It doesn't have to be everything, but it should be a start at something.
Okay.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but people get really tired of this and no action. So
Now, do you mean a vertical project, but you also mentioned
it
maybe
could
the
be a
financial?
vertical project. It could be mortgage assistance. It could be rental assistance.
Okay.
Something that shows that we're accomplishing something.
Mm-hmm.
Because in 3 years, that's a long time in a person's life.
So on the
In
short,
mine, it is.
So on the short term, we do have the down payment assistance program.
Okay.
And the intent behind that would be to wrap it up and have it
Exactly.
be available. And then Randy had also mentioned that he's on board with seeing the ADU code change and the committee being in support of that. And our planning manager, George Worley, mentioned to me that having had that presentation at this committee level, they've got the draft that's going to go to P&Z, Planning and Zoning Commission, on the 9th of November. So those wheels are in motion. So those 2 things are very actionable and very attainable in the 1 to 3 year time slot. Are you wanting to put on the short-term goal list another deliverable? Because we also do have the PUSD Taylor Hicks, the 2 units that the city will be using for employee recruitment. They're not long-term units for long-term stay, but they do help with recruitment. So we've got a couple of things.
All right, and I still think those are little tiny things, and if we came out with a program that was a down payment assistance or for whoever whatever we decided to qualify for that, whoever we qualify. But there needs to be something that's not just, okay, we did 2 of these, but that the people of this town that's going to depend on these services realize that we, in fact, the city, not we, but the city is doing their part to make this happen and doing it relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, going back to what Mike said, if the general population sees that things are happening, then those donors and people that want to get involved will be more receptive to our requests.
Yeah. So let me share my thoughts, and that is, you're absolutely right, and communicating that is of the utmost importance. From short-term goals, I do think down payment assistance, how we get there is yet to see, but a goal to provide down payment assistance, the ADU change we've talked about, mortgage assistance. So even though we may help them with a down payment, they still have to have a mortgage payment that is reasonable. Mm-hmm. And then those that don't want to own, there's a lot of younger generation folks out there, they don't want to own a house. They don't want the responsibility. So rental assistance and providing rental from that side, from that point of view. So I think all of those things are short-term, and all of those things can be, how we do it, I don't know, but can be addressed in the short term. When it comes to vertical, we can certainly, within the year, explain what we've done towards that goal, but actually achieving something vertical that is significant, I believe that's going to be our long-term goals. I don't think we'll be able to go.
It has to be long-term, because it's not, you can't build a house in 30 days. you
Yeah,
know?
right.
And the agreements with the builders and everybody involved in that, we could be talking months with each of those just
Yeah.
to get to a point that we can live with.
And setting up the structure to get there so it's not short-term.
Yeah, and I agree. But all those other things that you mentioned and I mentioned are something that we could shoot for.
Absolutely.
you know?
Agreed.
And it needs to somehow be conveyed in those short terms so that when we do these presentations, they can see what those short-term goals are, the people we're doing presentations to. Not enough for us to tell them, they need to see it. And when we
Good.
approach them, we put that in the thing, here are our short-term goals, how can you help us do this, or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, on that note, short-term, could we come up with a packet kind of a deal where it's like the education packet, like you're going to go out and give a little speech, or I am, or somebody else in the city, whatever, that they follow this outline of, because a lot of the people in the city don't even know this committee exists.
Yeah,
They don't know
that's-
that we're doing anything.
That's our next item
I know,
once we
it's no
finish.
B, I see
We're
it.
going to talk about that in just a
Well,
minute.
she was on short-term and I didn't, so.
Well, on the short-term goal list is quarterly outreach, but
Right.
Nicole had something else as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back. A couple meetings ago, we had talked about the possibility of recommending to council that a certain percentage of new development is allocated towards workforce housing. How does the committee still feel about that? Or is that something we want to pursue for a short term?
I actually had something about that, so do you mind if I
Nope,
comment on
please
that?
do.
So I think it's funny because I had it here on my notes too. So I think a lot of things right now that are in pause are out of the short-term list is the policy on new development workforce housing requirements, which is kind of like what you're saying, maybe an allocation of a big project, 10% is to workforce housing, whatever. But I think a lot of this, that and the incentive packet, which I think we've all discussed and we were in favor of, I think all that's going to come from that conversation with builder developers in that, whatever that meeting comes to be, because that's when we're going to get into the weeds of saying, will they even entertain that? Is it an absolutely no? Is it, yeah, sure, but give me the framework. Like how does that work? How is the city going to make that happen for me as a developer to give the city 10%? Who manages it? What are the parameters? That kind of stuff. So I think maybe we'll figure out a lot of that stuff on that meeting. One thing I will comment on that I feel we should put on the short term, and I know I don't want to keep adding and adding more, but we're talking pretty low-hanging fruit assistance programs, financial assistance programs. I would like to have a short-term goal be to set up the lowest hanging fruit type of fund with the city in which we can accomplish, say, there's been ideas circulating from what Randy talked about, escrow fees being donated or allocated from escrow services. Philanthropically, are there folks that would say, here's $10,000 towards this fund that will now help in down payment assistance programs, rental assistance programs, mortgage assistance programs. So I feel like the big how right now, I completely support all the assistance programs. I think that's a great short-term goal to hit. It's just the funding of it. I think we don't have the answer to the funding part. So I'd feel like let's just hammer it out. Let's just it seemed from financial with the city that it wasn't too cumbersome or too much of a undertaking to set up some. Granted, there's a lot of limitations. I'm not saying that the answer here is to go full city. I don't know what the funding will look like at all, but I think for what Mike's bringing up with assistance programs and what I feel everyone agrees with, let's just get down to the nitty-gritty of putting up what that fund looks like. At least we have something to pitch to philanthropists, stakeholders, anything, and say, hey, this is the lowest hanging fruit. Can we raise $100,000 in here? for assistance programs, and then we hammered out the specifics of what these assistance programs look like. That's I think, a very attainable, quick and dirty short-term goals that I think we can hammer out if we really do. I just think that that's funny because we have it all there. It's just the how part is really not as complicated as just saying it's the money. Where's the money coming from?
Right, it's the revenue
Yeah,
stream.
if we can figure that out, it would move pretty quick.
Okay. So Jonathan, one of the things, and I'm going to have to ask Matt this. Matt, are you there? Matt, did we decide if the city was both interested or could they manage this fund? Because it was my understanding that the city was maybe not interested in managing the fund. And by the way, there are fund managers independently out there. So I mean, do we do that?
How about you?
Yeah.
You gotta what?
P,
Pardon me?
Come in close.
I'm thinking we need to take a little time out.
It's ultimately going to be a question for the city council
Okay.
as to whether or not they're ready to
Yeah.
take on that obligation.
Yeah. Okay.
The simple answer is no.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out if the city has the desire to become a fund manager, because there's things attached to that. But one of the things I was going to tell you too, just a thought process. If you want to make this happen quick, let me tell you what my company did years ago when the market was great. If we had an investment opportunity that we would, I would identify a project and I would put it out. It was a form of GoFundMe to several of my stakeholders that decided they wanted to invest in this particular project. It was funded immediately, so long as the plan, you meet, you have a meeting, you introduce the product, you introduce the location. They make a decision at that time whether they're going to invest in it, how long is the hold, what are they going to make, and then you move forward. You fund it by Monday, and you move forward with it if they decide. They can pull out. There's terms that were crafted by an attorney. But if you want to get the funding quick and you want to do it legally, it's a form of it is not GoFundMe, but it's like that. And it happens very quickly, but you've got to have a project to sell. So, it could happen. It could happen. And then the other thing, somebody mentioned having something done in a few months. Well, it's not going to be a site built then. It's going to be some kind of a modular type situation. So because you can get those more readily than you can build now with a lot of the holdups with materials and things, it's non-controllable. But a lot of those modulars, you can get a delivery date. So anyway, just a hint.
And
Do you mind?
what's that?
Oh, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say,
I'm
maybe
sorry.
that's one of the short-term goals is to create a council recommendation to keep workforce housing in mind, or however it wants to be phrased, for a strategic goal or just for the budgeting season to create a fund. So that could be a really simple short-term goal of just make a recommendation to council, and then council, it's a good way for you guys to come to the front of council too, to say, we're here, this is one of the things we're doing. And a lot of people watch council meetings, and so that could be a good, simple, short-term goal.
Yeah, I think though we're getting away from what our goals are and getting it down into the discussion, how do we achieve those goals? So I think we're getting off point a little bit here when we're establishing goals, because I think we are getting to, okay, how are we going to do that? And that's yet to come. I think right now we should be focusing on what we want to see happen, and it might be through the help of a stakeholder group or a subcommittee, people that have strong knowledge on mortgages and what might be out there, or people that are in the building trades and the development side of things that we can break into a couple smaller groups and get down to, okay, how do we achieve these goals? Nicole, I did want to answer, because I do have a quick story to share when it comes to setting aside, having the developer set aside something for workforce housing. So we did that at Granite Dells Estates in 2008. We set aside a portion of it that would handle 160 workforce housing units. And Craig McConnell was the city manager at the time, so I sat down with Craig and I said, okay, let's define workforce housing. Who is going to qualify? Who gets to buy there? And if we get down to that sales price, because I wasn't renting anything, I was selling. If we get down to a sales price that fits workforce housing, who's to keep somebody from buying it and immediately flipping that home for market value? So it became, the immediate question is the city prepared to set up a workforce housing, some sort of a housing authority to monitor that? And there was no desire to do that. So there's certainly methods to make that happen, but there's also lots of challenges and lots of rules and regulations. If you're going to make it work, somebody has to enforce it. Somebody has to monitor it. Somebody has to qualify the people that are going to buy there. Somebody has to make sure it's maintained as workforce housing. So if we do have somebody with philanthropic interests, that it just goes away in no time at all, and all of a sudden everything we've done is back to market value housing. So there's certainly challenges there.
Yes.
Hi, Tammy DeWitt, community planner. So a lot when you're creating these short-term and long-term goals, what we're thinking about, these are going to be incorporated into the general plan, and the general plan will have an implementation section. And these will be brought up every 6 months. We're going to come back between the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council, and mostly when they're doing their strategic plans every year. Hey, we have all these goals. This is who's responsible for these goals, because that's going to be part of that too, is that you're going to have, here's your goal, here's strategies, who's responsible for that? And we're going to make sure to put it in the foresight every year when they're coming for their strategic plans to, hey, remember these goals, which we haven't done before. So we're going to make sure that these are part of the general plan and make it a very viable document this time. So I just want to put that in your forethought as you're thinking about these goals. So short term, this is a 10-year plan vision for the city. Short term, we're kind of thinking your low-hanging fruit, and then up to 5 years. Then your long term, which we know will take longer, will be up to 10 years. So we'll see in the 10 years what we can achieve. So.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so we've identified short terms. Have we identified long term?
We have the formalizing of the stakeholder organization.
Yes.
I had a build a tangible product to Tony's point. Launch workforce housing finance program. That was kind of what we were talking about on the short term list with a down payment assistance program. So maybe that would be on the short term list. And then creating a strategic plan. So to Howard Mechanic's earlier point and to what Tammy just mentioned, long-term goal, the committee should discuss if you want to put that into the framework of number of units. Is there a desire? As we continue to get more information back from our stakeholders from the surveys, we'll know a little bit more as to how many units there is an immediate need for, which will also inform how many units, we'll eventually need.
Right.
But that is a discussion that we should have as to how many, do we want to put that in, is that the language we want to use? That this goal is to see, 500 units by the end of the 5 years or what? I don't know.
I think that's a great goal to identify that number. I think Howard's dead on there. It needs to be defined, but that's going to come from our stakeholder group. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to tell us.
Great. So to your question, not a whole lot of long-term goals at this point. I have about 8 or 9 short-term goals, which we should probably work on refining, because some of them might need to go over to long-term just so that we can focus to get things done. So if you'd like, I could read off the list of what we have so far on the short term.
Okay.
So we have the developer building meeting to get information, how many, the allocation of units, long-term operation, what that might look like.
But that's not a goal. That's an action plan. Is that correct?
I had it down on the goal list to get that together. And the idea would be to have some sort of output from that meeting, not just to get the meeting together, but to have a some sort of information output from the developer builder meeting.
Okay.
And then short-term, the down payment assistance program, which could include the rent-to-own program, mortgage and rental assistance, again, a kind of a financial program around workforce housing. And then the Home of My Own program that the county uses right now, looking to see if there's some iteration of that that could work for the city. The ADU code change, council recommendation for new development workforce housing requirements. I don't know if we still want to investigate that as a recommendation to council, but that was on the list here. And then the fund, another council recommendation is looking at potential city fund. You know, at least having the fund there, not knowing exactly what the revenue stream will be. And then I had on the short-term list, you know, a quarterly public outreach. This goes to the second item on the agenda. General plan housing element draft, which is on this agenda, and then the create incentive package. It's a lot on the short-term goal list. But again, this is, if you all agree, this is kind of a 1 to 3 year short-term look. Does that sound reasonable?
It does. I would ask that you provide that in an email to all of the commission members, and we're tasked to pare that down, I think.
And move to long-term if necessary.
Yep.
Great.
And some could be an action item.
Right. Yep. I think a couple of them are action items, frankly.
Great. Okay. Do we want to move on? Do you want to talk goals more?
Well, I think on the long-term side, I think you know, the bottom line is hopefully we can get to a point of a vertical project. How we get there, we're going to need help with that for sure. But I think our long-term goal is to indeed provide permanent workforce housing and work on a vertical project. And I believe it's going to be either a land trust or a 501c3 or a combination of both.
I have one thing on long-term, Mike. I talk a lot about this thing that my city did. We involved the entire population of the city. That's how we generated those funds. It wasn't specific to developers, or it was the whole city. And we provided a service that they bought into, and that's what funded it. So I challenge everybody here today, long-term, to think of something that we could provide to our citizens that they'd be willing to pay for, that we could then take that fund and use part of that money that they're paying for to help fund this process. Long-term, if we had a steady stream of income that we could kind of count on or project, then we would know how much development that we could actually generate because of our assistance to developers, which would answer his question as to how many units are we going to get done in 5 years, because we'd have a projectable income stream. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I need to understand, answer intelligently on how you achieve the income stream and whether we would have support for that.
Well, like I said, we provided a service that we sold to our citizens. It was $7 a month. It was attached to their water bill. It wasn't mandatory. They signed up for it. We provided that service at $7 a month. Now, this is back in 1998 when we started. It's more now, but it's not tremendously more. You know what I mean? And it was diffused through the entire city. So we were in a budget deficit in 1998, like a lot of cities were. So this is a way for us to generate revenue to keep the fire department afloat and alive and actually improve our service. And the citizens paid for it. So what can we come up with that the citizens of Prescott are willing to pay for because it's something we can provide, and then we can take that money and part of it and use it toward this? That's it. So that's your challenge, guys. I've been racking my brain.
Well, if I could ask, what was the service that was provided?
It was called Fire Med. And I got to be careful here because, you know, kind of a political football. We provided ambulance delivery service within the fire service. We no longer had private ambulance in our city. We provided it. Now, this city, when I looked at this city and I looked at our city, my city was bigger, right? But the demographics are alike. Do you know what our daily population average here is?
It's,
Age? What?
No,
I think
the
it's
amount of people, the population.
100,000. It's around 100,000.
Yeah, it
because of
is.
the tourists.
It's around 100,000. We have 50,000 that live here, just under 50,000, but our transient population is double, right? So the people that are transient, they're not contributing on a regular basis to our economy because they don't live here. They're visiting and then they're leaving. If they're using central critical city services during the time they're here, is there a way to reimburse us for what happened while they were here because they don't live here? The answer is no. Our city created a program where we were able to capture the funds from our transient visitors, and our transient visitors in my city, because it was a beach community, was very, very high. So we captured that through the fire department, and we were able to capture those funds from not only our residents who voluntarily signed up for our program, but from our visitors that came to our city every day and used our city services. And like I said earlier, it generated a significant amount of money. And we had regulations as to what we could do with that money. We couldn't just go out and buy Ferraris. We had to spend it on the fire department's service delivery system, and our personnel. And that's what we did with it. But it's a little more involved than that, and I'd love to share it with you guys, but it'll take an hour to pitch it to you. But that may not be the answer here, but something like that we all can rack our brains on, and what can we come up with?
Okay. Again, I think we're getting into the how, and I think it's a great how, but you're right. We need to investigate it further and see if we have the support for that. So. Okay, good. Are we done with goals? Everybody good? All right. Let's move on to agenda item B. So I had an opportunity to, we're talking about public outreach. I had an opportunity to sit down with John Heine, and it was a very good meeting to solicit his help in taking the mission statement that we have worked on today and converting that into some talking points and a fact sheet, and talked about getting the information out to the public on, number one, what we're doing and how we are going to achieve those goals for workforce housing, not affordable, not Section 8, not HUD, workforce housing. Our discussion was who doesn't want a policeman or a fireman in their neighborhood, giving all of us a list of talking points. So if we want to go to the Kiwanis Club or the Rotary or any group they want to speak to, so we can get the word out on what we're doing. So it was a great meeting. I think we've got a good plan moving forward. So, any questions or comments from the committee?
So is there, because that's under the tourism department, right, essentially? Is that where Johnny's, or
John handles
economic develop-
communications.
Communications as a whole. So did it seem like they had capacity, funding, ability, and everything to essentially give us what you guys want, the talking points, put it together, and we'll share it with everybody? Is that kind of the thought?
I think the idea is for the committee to do the sharing part. So they'll help
Right.
with the crafting of the documents and take the information we provide them, put it in a nice format that's presentable. But then the committee members themselves would be reaching out to local groups, is my understanding.
Yes, but also setting up our own website to get information out. I guess from a funding standpoint, no dollars, but time. And they do have capacity, according to him.
Was there any discussion on social media? I know we talked about that last meeting pretty heavily about really using that as a tool for the community for outreach?
They can do that. They
Yeah.
they do Facebook, Instagram. They do all of that for the city regularly anyhow. So adding workforce housing elements as in their rotation would not be difficult. And they can get radio slots as well.
Correct.
That's awesome.
I actually thought he was going to be here, so, but I don't see him.
But I think the goal today was to get those 5 to 9 key talking points. If there's any input that the committee would like to see as far as the information that we provide to communications to draft those up. Is there any kind of points that we want to be sure? I mean, we'll obviously provide them with the language from the proposed vision and mission statements, but is there anything else, key points that you feel are important that would stick with people that John and his team should include as they work these up?
I'm getting into the weeds of the how right now, but I guess what I would say is just because we don't have the survey results yet, which was a big, I think relating with the community on the pain point, I think you start with the pain of like, this is how healthcare can look if we don't have goals or solutions, or workforce housing committee needs to work on these things. I just feel like it's premature right now to make up the talking points. I think we can all come up with maybe 5, 6 of them that we've talked about. I just think it's, the surveys was huge. I know we're going to probably talk about the general plan open house and what the community actually spoke to in regards to housing types and that kind of stuff. So I guess for me, Mike, I don't know, it's hard to have those. I don't know if we're wanting to start putting that communications content together, or if it's just essentially just checking off the box that we know we can now utilize that department. I guess I just don't know what talking points I would.
Yeah, I'm starting to hear snippets of pushback already. So I do think it's important that we get the information out as quickly as possible on what we're really trying to achieve, and how it's not going to affect someone's home price adversely. Maybe we need to officially invite John to address the committee, and
Okay.
especially after he's had time to work on it a little bit, and maybe our next meeting, see if we can have him make a short presentation.
Yeah, we can do that, and we can provide him with some of the items that the committee would, it sounds like the committee would like to see a draft of those items rather than kind of discuss and spitball them here today. So
That'd be great.
what we can do is, to your point, John, kind of consolidate this information, like, hey, general public, did you know this is the results of the recent general plan open house as to workforce housing, and then give a history of the issue and share some survey results, and then work on that from there. But yeah, we can have John present on some of those and kind of shoot around some drafts at maybe the next work study session. We'll need to give him a little bit of time to work on it, so I don't think
Right.
the next regular meeting would be appropriate.
Good.
And what would be the goal of the committee as it relates to time frame on getting this out there? I know yesterday is always desirable, but not feasible. So just something together by, the next month or two.
Yeah, it sounded like John was able to get on it fairly quickly, is what I heard. So
Great. Okay.
That's a goal.
I do have a question. Do we want to define officially what we're referring to as workforce housing? Okay, because just borrowing a definition that's already out there, the Urban Land Institute defines it as 60% to 120% of your area median income. So for us, that would be, I think our median is still 76,700. So 60% would be 46,020, and then 120% would be 92,040, which if you translate payments, and I can email this to you guys, that would be payments between $1,150 and $2,300 a month for housing to be at the 30%.
And the HUD's definition also includes utilities in there, 30% plus utilities. So I don't know if we want to have a amount for base utility offering, but that would be important. And absolutely, that should be part of the talking points is, hey, do you know what, I mean, it's going to be educational for the public. Did you know we have this issue, but did you know who this affects? That's great. Yeah, if you want to send that over to us, that'd be great. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Randy, do you have something?
Yeah, back on the education thing, you asked what's important. And I feel it's really important for a community to thrive and survive. Small business in America drives America. Big business is great, but America is driven on small business. Who runs small business? Who works at small business? So our citizens need to sort of think about that, wait a minute, if we support workforce, so small business has a place to live, then our small business community will thrive in our community, which makes our community thrive. I think you gotta, when you do the education thing, connect the dots, because the average citizen isn't thinking about that kind of stuff, right? I mean, 6 months ago, I wasn't really thinking about it either. But in order for small business to thrive, employees have to have a place to live. And if small business thrives in our city, our whole city thrives. Does that make sense, guys? So small business drives America. That needs to be part of the education.
Okay. And those are the things that we need to tell John that, hey, we want this included.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on that? All right, item C, Tammy.
Yeah. Tammy's going to take us through what she learned at the open house and what she needs from us on the general plan element.
I need help.
She's seeing spots right now, I'm pretty sure.
Well, this is just one of the many boards, and we got a lot of great information and input. We had about over 200 people show up at the open house, and it was on a weekday from 3 to 6. So to get that kind of input, I mean, participation was really, really, really good. So I'm just kind of, we're lucky. George kept telling me, hope for 100. Man, we way surpassed that. So this was the one that we put together for workforce housing. So community input tells us there is a need for workforce housing, which often comes in the form of multifamily and manufactured housing. We know that that's basically the form you're going to see it more than SFRs. So the first one we had, the green means that you support, red was you disagree. So apartments, an apartment is defined as a residence that is rented, often as part of a larger residential building. So we got 29 green and 22 R. So it's about half and half, not too bad. Townhomes are attached to one another, with each having at least one shared wall with adjacent townhomes and can have ownership instead of renting. We wanted to throw out different options. And that was 43 green, 10 red. So people like the idea of people owning it. Then we brought up the accessory dwelling unit, an ADU for long-term rentals. And an ADU is a smaller residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as a standalone single-family residence, can be attached or detached to the primary residence. Under current code, we cannot be rented. We want to let that know. There was a little note on the spreadsheet that one of our members noted that there was some confusion, or not understanding, that this is saying that they're going to put this ADU and it's be rented long-term. And then questions that came up, make sure they have adequate parking and things like that, which we already do with those. So that one was 42 green, 21 red. So that was a really good, we thought, representation that people are pretty supportive of this. Plus it's income, additional income for somebody. Additional areas for manufactured housing. We had a map close next to this that showed the areas that allow for manufactured housing right now. We don't have a lot in the city of Prescott. You know where they are because there's already manufactured housing there. But we kind of had the map that defined it, and there's been discussions about creating additional areas, which would be rezonings, to expand those areas. And it was 31 green, 27 red, about half and half. So that one's educational because people don't understand what manufactured housing, what they really look like now, and how they're built now. So that's going to be an educational thing. And we learned a lot that there's a lot of education needed in our community people were saying, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. And we do a lot of that. So it was like, we need to educate the public of what we do. And then the rest was just other notes and ideas that people put on the board, which they're all summarized in that spreadsheet for you so you can see them. And then what we can do is after I meet with the last committee member, we can send you out all the comments because there's housing and different additional comments about in all the boards that we saw. So it'd be really good for you to see all that we got from the community. And then we also have a survey out there. There were a couple housing questions, and we're going to be closing that soon, and we can bring you the results of that too from the survey we had for the general plan. But what we're asking for you is the help in creating, because this is a new element. Instead of having podged around the different elements, to create one housing element, which is required once you hit 50,000. We know we're out there. This is going to be adopted in 2025. Might be closer to it. So we wanted to take care of that now. We know that's an issue. And we are also looking at other general plans to see what people put in for housing to give you other ideas for goals too. But what we really need is the goals. That's going to be a really important portion more than the body of it, of what you guys want to achieve, the short term and long term, that we can add to that implementation section. That was a quick summary. Any questions?
Tammy, just ask everybody if they understand the term element inside, because I think a lot of people that have not been involved in the planning process understand that. Just
Sure.
let them know.
So an element is basically a chapter that we have land use, circulation, open space, recreation, all these different elements. And it's just that's required by state statutes. So we can provide you the housing, what's required in state statutes for having in a housing. That may help too when drafting this too. So, and I don't have that off the top of my head, sorry. But I do have that information. And if you also look at the Plan Prescott website, all that stuff's on there too. We have what's required in a plan. We have a whole bunch of information. And also a website we can use for this community too. Planning the future, preserving the past. That's our theme for Plan Prescott. So that's a great place for you to have your information. And on the front page, we can have a tile for housing information or workforce housing information. We can use that to already have a website. Don't have to create another one.
So the document that Tammy provided, as she mentioned, it's got a lot of text in it, and it's not the spreadsheet, it's the housing element document. And did we make copies? Okay, great. So we previously provided this via email, but basically all of the text has come from the existing general plan, but as Tammy mentioned, it was just scattered throughout the various elements. Well, now with the 2025 general plan, there will be one housing element where it's all collected. So the idea is that this committee use the text from the previous general plan and change it, strike it, whatever you all think is best, and then be able to present at the end of November some suggestions, some of the committee's goals, some of maybe a number for dwelling units that we'd like to see as a workforce housing at the end or during that 2025 to 2035 timeframe. So the hope would be that the committee really study this document, offer any changes that you feel are appropriate, and then put in some workable goals that could be incorporated into the implementation section that Tammy mentioned earlier. Any questions? I know this document was circulated a while ago. I don't know if you all had a chance to read it, but this document could also help springboard some long-term goals for the committee as well. So you might find some valuable information that helps flesh out more long-term goals. Does all that make sense?
Yeah, and Chelsea, how are you going to, are you just going to present whatever they come up with to the general plan committee?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Like a synopsis?
Yeah, we don't expect to have like this document redlined with, all the particulars and wordsmithing, but any general concepts that you want to see included, any, like I mentioned, goals, any changes, stuff that you find in there that really aren't relevant anymore, or you feel like they're not capturing the vision of the committee and workforce housing in the Prescott area. And then it would be my hope that a member or members of the committee join us at the general plan meeting at the end of November to provide support or present to the general plan committee. So that would be a goal. It would give everybody maybe a practice run at presenting to other groups in the community.
Do you have a date for that?
The date of the November general plan meeting?
29th.
29th. And I believe those are always on a Wednesday as well. Okay.
Questions, comments? Sounds like we have a bit of a homework assignment to read through this and provide thoughts and comments. Then we'll get together as a group and make sure we all agree.
And I think we had planned to put this on the regular meeting for this committee's first meeting in November so that you can solidify what you want to present to the general plan at the end of November.
Good.
Yeah.
Chelsea,
Okay.
do you know offhand, was that a PDF that you sent this out as?
I'm fairly certain it was a Word document.
Okay, so we can edit it.
Yes. Fabulous.
Okay. Anything else? Agenda items for the next meeting.
All right. Yeah, so definitely the general plan item will be on there. And from our conversation on the goals, I feel like we need to get some information about the housing authority and maybe investigate that a little bit. And then if the committee wants to have, Amber and I can investigate some experts in maybe tax accounting, grants, write-offs, those kinds of financial benefits. We can talk to our finance team to see who might be best at that. We can reach out to Housing Solutions in Northern Arizona to see if they have any contacts. But that could be an item that the committee discusses at the next regular meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll have survey results. So those will be regular agenda items that if we have a presentation, that would probably, those few items will probably take up that whole time. And then as far as the next work session, do we want to go ahead and plan for another work session in the month of November? Do we have travel plans?
Anybody?
I think I'm fine.
I'm good.
I'm pretty open, so if anybody comes up with a date, I can probably be there.
Yeah,
George.
yeah, but everyone's
Do a
okay.
Survey Monkey? Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm in town too.
We're good for another work session, and perhaps at that work session, we'll focus on just goals. And we'll just talk about the list that we came up with, what items can be shifted to long-term, and then if we have time, dig into one or two of them.
And in the interim, can you?
Yes,
Email
we
those
will
out to
email
us.
those out after this meeting.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, sir.
Here.
Oh, yeah, no, I got, okay.
Yeah, the agenda item said regarding possible future agenda topics. So I don't know if it was just about the next meeting, but I just wanted to mention that regarding the discussion that you've had before and was brought up again today about requiring a certain percentage of new developments to be allocated to workforce housing. I think there should be a discussion about that because, well, one thing I just want to mention, you mentioned, Mike, that it depends on what the developers want to do. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. It's what we're going to ask the developers to do or require the developers to do. So voluntary efforts are great, and that would be great if there's a bunch of developers who want to come in and say, we're going to build 600 units for workforce housing. But I think this is a different subject. Is there going to be a recommendation to council? And can there be legally a requirement? And if they, because I believe some cities have that requirement, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, can I speak to that?
That's on the goal list that we'll be discussing at the future, at a future meeting.
And Matt just left, but I believe that is something.
Oh, there he is. He's hiding.
Hiding.
I was looking at the chart.
Yeah, Matt, if that, in order for a municipality to require a developer to set aside 10% of his money for workforce housing, wouldn't that have to go and be legislated? We couldn't, as a council, vote yes or no on that. That is becomes a.
To the extent it's going to be something that, do you want me to?
Yeah, here. Oh, Tony's.
Thank you, Matt Pedracki, Deputy City Attorney. To the extent it's going to be something that applies to everyone across the board, it will have to be legislation, basically through an ordinance. And all legislation, of course, is referable. If you wanted to work out a specific deal with a specific developer, then you can look at the development agreement option. I think Mr. Fan had mentioned that, there was some discussion in a prior development he did where there was a negotiated term. So it really depends. If it's across the board, yes, it's going to have to be legislative. If it's particular, it's going to have to be a negotiated contract through a development agreement.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. You took the words right out of my mouth. So negotiating that is something that's certainly doable. But we got to get, again, we've got to get to the point is it something that we have the rules and regulations in place to make it happen? Because that's where it fell flat, the experience I shared with you. So we need more input from our city fathers at that point, sorry, and mothers.
Recommend the council consider that as new legislation.
Certainly.
That's all I'm bringing up.
Certainly. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Yes, sir.
One more silly little thing. I assume at some point we're going to be out in the public educating them on what we're doing. And I'd like to give some thought to, as a guy that wore a uniform most of his adult life, is there some clothing appropriate that this committee could then wear when they're out in the public to identify us as to who we are? So, and that we'd be willing to buy ourselves, or some entrepreneur might be willing to donate to all of us as a tax write-off.
Let's hear from John first and talk about how we get our message out.
All right.
Okay, are we done? Anybody else? Meeting adjourned.
Mike.
Did you say it's going?